Вітаю всіх, колеги. Сьогодні дуже цікавий день, день відкритого банкінгу. Вчора Олексій Шабан виступав і сказав, що робота не припинялась над відкритим банкінгом, імплементацією, і для Національного банку це пріоритет. І сьогодні ми будемо говорити про унікальний шлях України, бо зараз, будучи в епіцентрі відкритого банкінгу в Британії, яка єдина країна, яка фактично це реалізувала, це працює, це найкращий поки що кейс. Я багато спілкуюсь з локальним ком'юніті, і ми прийшли до того, що у України досить унікальний шлях. Ми дуже розвинена діджитал-країна з діджитал-інфраструктурою і вже на шляху такої повномасштабної діджиталізації бік-дейта, державних послуг і так далі. І це відкриває свій унікальний шлях для України в розрізі імплементації відкритого банкінгу і відкритих фінансів. І, скажімо так, навіть на шляху відкритих фінансів ми вже йдемо, ще не маючи імплементованих стандартів і концепту щодо цього. І у нас на нещодавній зустрічі з Ентоні, де ми познайомились особисто, це була презентація української стратегії відбудови фінсектора за підтримки Національного банку і Кембриджу, наша велика програма. І ми з Ентоні якраз обговорювали це питання. Який саме шлях у України, маючи цю дуже розвинену інфраструктуру свою, тобто фактично ми вже йдемо шляхом Австралії по діджиталізації бік-дейта, але в той же час ми вже маємо прийняти legal framework на рівні парламенту і поштовх реальний для імплементації відкритого банкінгу в Україні. Тобто у нас досить унікальна ситуація. І Ентоні мені на це відповів, що це, ви знаєте, це якийсь такий OpenX, ваш унікальний шлях, про який я попросила Ентоні сьогодні розказати. So Anthony, it was just I explained the small story about our meeting and discussing OpenX implementation, open banking, open finance, our unique way, and so that I ask you just to present it and to develop this idea and to introduce to our participants. So the floor is yours. Anthony is the head of Open Banking Consortium focused on Ukraine, extremely interested to help Ukraine to develop open banking and open finance. Anthony, thanks for being with us today, and the floor is yours.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. Доброго дня. That's it.
Доброго дня.
Let me just share the screen, please.
Yeah.
And let's.
Yeah, it's okay. Mm-hmm.
Anthony, please switch on your microphone.
Yeah, we don't hear you right now. Anthony, we don't hear you. It's subtitles, everything is okay. But
yeah.
But no, yeah. Right now we have very nice, but
yeah. So is that better?
Yeah, it's better, and we hear you. Right now.
Oh, excellent! Thank you, thank you. Well, good morning, everybody. I always have trouble with Zoom. I'm better on Teams. Thank you for the opportunity to.
Дуже дякую за можливість зробити цю презентацію. Отже, це для мене дуже багато значить. Я підтримую концепцію підтримки України можливими всіма.
About a subject that I find very interesting and the future trend of open banking. So a little bit about me. My name's Dr. Anthony Evans. I worked with the Open Banking Implementation Entity for several years, where I met many of the people who may be, or a number of the people who shall be speaking this morning. I helped support the ecosystem, all the participants, banks, fintechs, and also worked closely with the design authorities. I was a member of the Technical Design Authority. When I finished at Open Banking, my work was handed over. I created a small consultancy called Open Banking Delivery to support open banking developments across the world. I am familiar with Ukraine. My members of my family are Ukrainian. My ex-wife, my in-laws, so I started the Ukraine Open Finance Initiative about 4 or 5 months ago. So that's a bit about me. Open Banking Delivery, as I mentioned, we support ecosystems across the world. We regard open banking and open finance as a social initiative. It's something that helps the people within the country, and that is the most important thing that we need to try and do. We know many and work closely with many of the main players in open finance. So Radium, for example, Ozone API, Hugh is presenting later on today. John Broxis, Open Banking Exchange, we collaborate and work with them. So we've supported a number of ecosystems as they evolve in the world, Brazil in particular, Philippines, Mexico, and Chile. And we also continue to support quite a number of UK fintechs with technical strategic advice and so on. And as you can imagine, since we work internationally and we look at and work with UK fintechs, we're interested to see how we can help UK export their services to evolving ecosystems. And soon it'll be happening in the other direction as well. We shall be importing services, particularly at the moment from Brazil to the UK. I'm delighted to say that one of my colleagues, a friend called John Wrightson, he actually is resident in Kyiv, which is very helpful in this case. And we started the Open Finance Initiative in April. We're continuing to work for free. I don't know how long we can continue doing that, but these things have to be done. So I've mentioned John Wrightson. He's resident in Kiev and in Lviv in the last 8 years, also in Kharkiv. And he has a great deal of open finance expertise. I met him when we were both working at the implementation, UK's open banking implementation entity. And his email is here, as is mine. Please feel free to contact me with any questions and I'll do all I can to help. Ukraine Open Finance Initiative is not for profit, and what we want to do is try and gather together all the support and information that may be required to help accelerate the growth of open banking and finance in Ukraine. We regard this as a good thing for everybody, including the UK. We're very proud of the support that has been given to Ukraine militarily so far by the UK. It needs to be extended to business support as well, and that's where we come in. I also believe it can actually make a difference whilst things are still active, because it can introduce additional flexibility of response in terms of financial services. So John Wrightson, and we also have a variety of partners, some of the organizations that support us. I shall mention here perhaps these two, Radium, who created the trust framework for all the active production ecosystems in the world, UK, Brazil, Australia, Open Energy, they're all underpinned by Radium. Ozone API, presenting later on this morning, you'll be meeting Hugh Davis, perhaps Chris Michael as well. Great people, also original open banking implementation entity team, and they know a great deal. They're very good people. I can recommend them. They support the regulators, create the right sort of standards, and also the banks in order to comply, but also go beyond so they can help become profitable in their engagement with open finance. So OpenX, okay, this is a new phrase. We've all heard of open banking, open finance perhaps. So open banking in the UK, which is just financial institutions, open finance in Brazil and Australia. Brazil is the nearest to production, and they include insurance. So they have banking, finance, and insurance. Australia, they are bringing together energy, insurance, banking. That's a little bit time before it happens, but there comes a point when you try to create an ecosystem that's got lots of industries in it, and you then wonder what to call it. You can't call it open banking, insurance, energy, and so on. So replace it all by X. And this is what OpenX is all about. And it's a really interesting trend and very important. And I firmly believe that Ukraine is actually in a very good position to rapidly create this and to become a world leader in this technology. And I'll explain some of the reasons why in a minute. So OpenX, everything comes to life, really. It all actually starts working when you have the financial institutions which underpin all the other services. When you think about it, all the other things that we do, energy, insurance, green initiatives, and so on, at the bottom of that, there are usually payments. And so what we're doing now is building an ecosystem, which is all the other industries that we engage with, and which as an integrated part of it is finance and banking, payments, and so on. So in the UK, it's actually quite narrow scope, just open banking. And when people started doing open banking 2017, 2018, they said, great, all we have to do is connect, set up these APIs, connect, and everything will work fine. We'll all make money. Didn't happen. It got a bit better in Brazil when they started bringing in open insurance as well. Now we've got a wider scope. And what happens is that as the scope of an open ecosystem gets wider, the opportunities for profitability, including the banks, increases. The whole thing becomes much more effective. Artificial intelligence, for example, the only thing it can do really in the UK is just look at your spending trends, categorize, intelligently categorize transactions and so on. There's not a great deal more it can do. Artificial intelligence works best when it's got a lot of data, and you don't get that necessarily in a UK style implementation. The UK did brilliantly. It's still the most advanced in the world, but it needs to try and catch up with other countries, in my view. So here's a few examples of some OpenX scenarios. And some of these might start looking a bit familiar to you. And I'll come on to that in a minute. So by bringing in more industry sectors, we can then mix it all up together with finance underpinning everything. So car purchase, leasing, Volvo are doing a great deal of work on this. Their concept is that when you go in to buy a car, the most painful bit is actually sitting in the car showroom, arranging the payment for the car, signing all the paperwork so you can go. They want to have it so that you walk in and say, I'll have that one. You sign a simple subscription of some sort and you drive the car away. That's it. You shouldn't be there for more than about 5-10 minutes having chosen your car. The exciting bit is having the car. It is not buying it, or the paperwork and so on that goes with it. Insurance, lifestyle integration. So, for example, we can take some healthcare information and use that to advise the health insurance. We can also, of course, take that healthcare and give additional healthcare advice. Make sure that everything fits together with your insurances, loyalty and rewards programs. So if I make a payment, say for my car, perhaps I can make a payment through a channel which will allow me to gain some points and so on. So by having this wider view of what's going on, you can achieve so much more. However, open banking delivery aren't the people who create these services. What we aim to do is to give you the components that allow everybody else to create the services. You bring your inventiveness, is the thought that crosses my mind. And Ukraine's in a good position to do this. So why is this? Okay, so OpenX systems work best and can be implemented most effectively when it's got good technical skills, people to do it. Okay, we can check that. Ukraine, technologically very advanced. We know how well it was doing before the war. Those skills are still there, ready to be used and deployed. A flexible workforce, familiar with delivering services quickly. Okay, well, we have, I'll come on to it in a minute, state and a smartphone. The Zelensky government started the idea in 2018. It's already there now. That is rapid delivery. Digital identification for participants. The UK doesn't have this. However, as you I'm sure know, Estonia does, and so does Ukraine. So, and obviously, if you're going to be bringing industries together, you've got to know exactly who an individual is. And if each industry has got a different identifier for that one person, it makes the job quite difficult. And this is a major infrastructural issue when we try and achieve such a thing. Australia has it, Brazil has it, UK doesn't, Ukraine does. So digital identification for participants, a resilient and a secure infrastructure. Well, you're used now to ensuring that your infrastructure is resilient and secure. A government committed to the objectives. Well, yes, I mean, with state in a smartphone, they get it. The Ministry of Digital Transformation understand the potential of this. That is unusual. And a technologically aware population familiar with the ideas of data sharing. You've got all of these. It's looking really quite promising. There's something strong that we can build on here. So I've mentioned state in a smartphone. It already does, which is why I said you might have seen some similar use cases to that before. It's similar to what Open Finance and OpenX does. And it gives a number of use cases. So you've got population familiarity with the idea. That's good. You've also got use cases that can be extended using open finance technology. I'll be saying how we can perhaps merge the two to give the best of both worlds. And Trembita, which I note is in Carpathian Mountains, and that's where my mother-in-law came from. A data sharing expertise. The expertise is already there by collaborating with Estonia, the digitization law. These are all good things that help push Ukraine into a good position to enable OpenX. So let's have a look to see what perhaps this could look like. So here we've got state in a smartphone with Trembita. Here we've got a potential OpenX ecosystem both have a trust framework of some sort. Here's Trembita that came from Estonia. Here's an open banking style trust framework. And what I mean by that is the directory, which controls the permissions of authorized entities. This is incidentally what one of our partners in the Ukraine Open Finance Initiative do, and that is Radium. They build these things. And they can build them very quickly now, which is very helpful. Now, let's just say, for example, let's take these two cases of State in a Smartphone, Open Finance and OpenX, and investigate how they can merge. We can take the strengths of both and use them to support each other. Now, I have, as you would expect, Trembita functionality, the framework there, and the open banking style, the directory, the trust framework, I have them overlapping. It's entirely a matter of government and Ukrainian choice, whether they overlap at all or whether there's a strong overlap. I don't know the answer to that yet. We would have to investigate to reach the right balance that everybody is happy with. But as a consequence of taking those two components, we strengthen each of them. And by having, perhaps one of the important aspects is that when you do this, what we're then able to do is to bring in certified third-party innovators. So the government's done a great job in creating State in a Smartphone, driven by government requirements. That's fine. But if we take an open banking style framework as well, what we're able to do is open it up to individual organization, private organizations who are suitably certified, I have to emphasize, and their inventiveness can then be put onto the existing framework. So now you have government initiatives, and then you can also have private initiatives with innovation coming in to provide a greater mix of services. And provided everything is managed carefully and properly so that the public continue to trust, and that is vital, then the population receive a wider range of services integrated on a more broad basis with greater imagination, if you like, with inventiveness brought into the overall ecosystem. That's what is why we think that, or believe that OpenX can be implemented quickly in Ukraine, because the existing skills and the public expectation is already there. There are already services that are close to what would be done in an open X ecosystem anyway, so that there is a public expectation and an acceptance of it. In the UK, we'd have some hurdles to overcome before everybody trusted it properly. Now, there may be trust issues sometimes, and reliability issues perhaps, and security issues maybe around Trembita and State in the Smartphone at the moment, and organizational stuff as well from the different ministries, sometimes collaborating rather better than others. But we can work on that by taking this combination. And so, because, just to emphasize, the State in the Smartphone, centrally coordinated, great results, which have been delivered very quickly. It's already a really good achievement within Ukraine. And there's a great deal that we need to understand. This is that I need to understand as well, in particular. But we're thinking that if we were to take OpenX, we can create an ecosystem alongside that enhances everything that's already there. So DIA, Trembita, data sharing, we could control the permissions for access very closely, very tightly. That's exactly what the directory and trust framework in an OpenX ecosystem does. And as you can imagine, the permissions, the consents granted by users, such as myself with my smartphone, are very complicated because it involves a lot of different types of information. You need a strong trust framework to control that, and each participant may well also need something, an authorization server, so it has an exact picture of what permissions, what consents everybody has done. This all comes as part of an OpenX framework. So we can take that, combine it potentially with Trembita, state in a smartphone, and then we also get new functionality coming in. I'm fascinated by the idea of bringing in, for example, agriculture. So let's say that a farmer can receive advice on growing the crops, when to harvest, when to take to market according to the available prices, can receive payments for produce immediately across the ecosystem, can, all these things put together really can significantly help, I believe, many industries. And of course, it's international. Within the OpenX ecosystem, I would personally investigate straight away UK standards. They're up, they're working, and you can just take them, and Hugh can describe how to do this later on in Ozone API. You can take the UK standards, implement them straight off. In fact, Kate might already have done some work around that. We can also take, however, of course, the Berlin Group standards. Now, that may be of particular interest because although the Berlin Group is not as technologically advanced because of various complexities around implementation, it does cover all the countries around you, or at least the ones that you would want to talk to. And this means, therefore, that via OpenX, you can be giving much stronger support to the diaspora in different countries and bring them in. So they still are in closer contact with Ukraine, and they're still Ukrainian, even when abroad. So we can enable registered entities to compete, broadening the range of services, and everything grows. And Ukraine can do this. You have the skills, you have the familiarity with the concept, and you, I hope, have the international support to enable it to be done quickly. There are also technological advances since open banking was first created in the UK, which means that things like the trust framework, the directory, can now be built very quickly. This is one of the things that enables us to take a much more agile approach to the development of an ecosystem. We have a methodology now wrapped around agile, which allows you to create an ecosystem very early on, so you use it as a means of communication with all the participants, so everybody understands what they need to be doing, including the regulators, the central bank, fintechs, and so on. They all understand, and the technologists in particular, they understand each other that much better because there is already an ecosystem that they can use as a means of communication to understand what it is that they need to do. So what we want to do is, well, I think I've made that clear, I hope. We want to get this going as quickly and effectively as possible. We want to make it the best in the world. We want to do it as soon as possible. Many may think that this has to be done as part of post-war recovery. I don't think that is the case. In fact, there's a lot to gain by starting it right away. The skills are available. It also means that when we start integrating OpenX with existing services, you can roll out new services very quickly. And this is important in circumstances where you need to respond quickly to emerging and emergency circumstances. The example in the UK, for example, is COVID. When COVID outbreak came, via using open banking technology, participants were able to get COVID payment methods launched, production, 2 weeks, which isn't bad going. That's the only way that could have been done. And we can have a similar agility within an ecosystem during wartime, which is important, we believe. So it uses the existing Ukrainian skills, the ecosystems. We can launch services quickly, and we just need relative regional stability in Ukraine. We can get things underway. We've also designed methods of working which will enable participants to keep working even when power, internet, etc. is interrupted. So a resilient ecosystem used to build this so that the work is not interrupted by any damage to the infrastructure. And of course, for the UK, it shows that we're bringing something that the UK does best in the world. The UK is regarded as a world center of expertise for open banking. Bringing that to Ukraine as a public demonstration of commitment of support is, I think, very good for everybody. So I won't dwell too much on this. I think I'm almost out of time, so I'll wrap it up fairly quickly. I think I've covered most of this, and you can please feel free to read and ask me any questions. We've got covered the skills, active engagement, reuse of existing technology, commoditizing, so infrastructurally it's not as difficult to build as before, the agile approach, using the best international skills that we have, bringing them in to help create the ecosystem within Ukraine and then hand over. That's what we do. That's what we did in the UK and in Brazil. That's what we do in Ukraine. And because of that, it creates employment. That's good. Right, just finishing off. I shall skip this slide. There we are. I'm going to slip a few. This is an example of the approach that we can take. And here, although I call it a laboratory, others would call it a sandbox, I would argue we create it first, early on. Security, that's important. We've also got access to chief information security officers in every country in which open banking exists. We can bring those skills to bear. And so we think this, it's a good news story for everybody, for Ukraine. It helps kickstart the post-war recovery, gets you back into the position that you deserve to be in. And importantly, because of the publicity given by creating this within Ukraine and the development of the skills, and also, let's face it, a relative cost advantage, Ukraine can become a hub then for inward investment. Everybody's interested in Estonia. Okay, let's do the same in Ukraine. And so you can also become an exporter of skills and services, a showcase for how it should be done, and respond quickly to the current circumstances. For the UK, it's really good news because it demonstrates UK commitment, establishes those better long-term relations, and enhances export trade opportunities, not least perhaps because we've built an OpenX ecosystem, which is international. So some of it could be as a result of that. And demonstrates how the UK can help lead the rest of the world in open ecosystem research, development, and delivery. Okay, that's my time. I've overrun a little bit. I hope Kate will forgive me, but thank you very much, Jacoyo, for allowing me to present today. It's genuinely appreciated. And any questions, happy to.
Thank you so much, Anthony, for amazing presentation. And the question is, so you spoke about those OpenX developments, ecosystem and approach, which should be the first steps from, let's say, EMA association or any other markets, community builder or regulator like National Bank of Ukraine to keep going within this scheme and to start implementation?
That's a good question. My guess, and I could be wrong, and Kate, you're probably better qualified to answer the question than I am, but I think the central bank needs to be part of it. The picture I have in mind is that the Ministry of Digital Transformation. I think that engaging with them would be incredibly valuable because they have this broader view, and also, courtesy of Mikhail Fedorov, they also have the authority to bring people together to help make this happen. And I think that was one of the key, very clever moves as underpinning State in a Smartphone. And they would be used perhaps to the similar concept when we look at OpenX. So that would be one approach I would take. The other approach, of course, is we all need to find funding. Unfortunately, all that I've done within the initiative so far is free of charge for myself and from all the participants, but we need to find funding. Now, the Ministry of Digital Transformation will have contacts, say the World Bank, European Development, and so on, who can then represent the ideas, establish an initial project to investigate and set up effectively a large-scale sandbox, to create that and extend it to bring in other industries and to probably collaborate, I'd have thought, with Estonia to understand, if necessary, the skills may already be there, of course, in Ukraine, to understand how Trembita and the open banking style trust frameworks can effectively collaborate. I think those three things. So engage with the industries, create a sandbox, use the government to reach out and obtain funding for this initiative, at least in early stages, so then we can see how it goes. Beyond that, there is the scope, but I would be cautious of private investment from other organizations. But I'm always cautious about that because an open ecosystem belongs to the country. It is not necessarily just a commercial process. So we need to make sure it meets the public objectives. Sorry, that was probably a longer answer than you want.
It's interesting what can be the volume of investments needed to develop this technical infrastructure, maybe on your example of the UK, but I know that in the UK it was quite fantastic amount. Maybe it can be less.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And the figures talked about in the UK often include how much the banks needed to spend in order to comply. Now, if you look at the cost of, say, a digital bank, maybe Starling, Monzo, to come into line, to comply, it's very low. If you look at something like HSBC, it's very high. Now, the reason for the difference is not because of open banking, it's because of the infrastructure within the banks.
Okay.
And OBIE itself actually nearly always ran under budget. so it didn't go over. So the banks do complain about the cost of it, but if the banks are flexible, it can be done relatively cheaply. It is also much easier now because the process that we've created to build open banking makes the whole thing much smoother. There are certain things that were not done in the UK that could have been done, should have been done, but we can now do in Ukraine, which will make the integration process of banks very much easier and cheaper.
You mean that as much more older and outdated system for the bank, so more investments needed, right?
Yes. Typically, a large bank with a legacy infrastructure, as I say, held together with string and sticky tape, they cost a lot to maintain, let alone adapt. So this is a typical cost overhead, but there's nothing we can do about that. The banks need to modernize. It's just one of those things. But it also, of course, gives an advantage to the emerging digital banks like N26, for example, where they can, they don't have to worry about the legacy because they don't have it. It's all cloud-based. So, and that gives a good opportunity for the more innovative challenger banks because typically they have a simpler ecosystem that's more adaptable.
Thank you so much.
Колеги, чи є питання до Ентоні?
Sorry?
So we're just asking if some questions from our participants.
Thank you.
So no questions, right? I think we can go ahead with our next speakers. Anthony, thank you so much for your presentation and your participation today. Interesting ideas. So I do believe that we will build something unique and the best global in open banking.
I think absolutely. It's perfectly feasible. But yes, thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate it. I shall now go